Welcome back to another story on the success mindset. Before we begin, tell us where in the world you are watching from, because today's tale takes us deep into the life of a man who thought he had it all: success, love, and control, only to discover that beneath the surface of his empire, the very foundation of his life was beginning to crack. This is not just a story about construction and buildings, but about betrayal, deception, and the resilience of a man who refused to be destroyed by those closest to him. Cameron Collier was the kind of man who made others believe in the American dream. At just 35, he had carved a path from the dust and sweat of framing houses to the gleaming steel of skyscrapers. His company, Collier Construction, had grown into the most respected building firm in Phoenix, with more than 200 employees and contracts worth millions. Every inch of his calloused hands told the story of his journey. They were not the hands of a man who sat in boardrooms giving orders, but of one who had once driven nails, poured concrete, and measured beams under the scorching Arizona sun. Those same hands had signed contracts with city developers and investors, had shaped skylines, and had clasped the shoulders of workers who saw in him both a leader and a brother. Success was not just a word to Cameron, it was the reality he had bled for. That reality stretched out before him every time he pulled into the sprawling ranch house he had built for his wife, Jennifer. The place was a masterpiece, a personal testament to what he could accomplish when he combined vision, skill, and relentless determination. Custom stonework framed the entry, imported Italian tiles gleamed under soft lighting, and the kitchen was the kind of centerpiece that made magazines drool with envy. To the world, it was the home of a man at the top of his game, with a beautiful wife by his side and a future paved in gold. Yet as Cameron stood in that same kitchen one morning, watching Jennifer's manicured nails tap impatiently against the granite countertop, he realized that no amount of wealth or architectural mastery could immediately solve the problem she now raised. "The water pressure's been dropping for weeks," Jennifer complained, her voice laced with that polished irritation she wore like perfume. "I can barely get a decent shower anymore." She was 32, still the dazzling blonde who had turned heads at a charity gala 5 years earlier, where Cameron first saw her smile ignite the room. To him, she was still stunning, a perfect jewel set against the background of his achievements. Yet there was something in her tone, a sharpness beneath the glamour that Cameron had begun to notice more often. He nodded, already shifting gears in his mind as he cataloged the possible causes. Years in construction had taught him to diagnose problems with precision, whether in blueprints or in plumbing systems. "I'll call Mike Shepard," he said, his voice steady. "He's the best plumber in the city, works all my commercial sites." Jennifer merely lifted an eyebrow as if to say she expected nothing less than the best. Mike arrived within the hour, a man weathered by time but strengthened by experience. In his 50s, with honest eyes and hands that bore the marks of decades in the trade, Mike was the kind of professional Cameron trusted implicitly. They had worked side by side on countless projects, and Cameron knew that if anyone could find the root of the problem, it was him. After making his rounds through the house, testing the faucets and gauges, Mike gave his assessment with the calm authority of someone who had seen it all. "Probably a mainline issue," he said, setting down his tools. "I'll need to get under the house and trace the pipes." "Could be a break near the foundation." Cameron agreed without hesitation and helped Mike gather the necessary equipment. When he had designed the home, he had made sure the crawl space beneath it was wide enough for maintenance. Forward thinking had always been his edge, whether in construction or in life. Mike disappeared into the dark recesses with a flashlight, while Cameron returned to his office to review blueprints for their newest project, a luxury apartment complex rising in downtown Phoenix. He became absorbed in the lines and angles, the precision of design that always grounded him. But his concentration was broken when Jennifer appeared in the doorway. her expression oddly tense. "How long will this take?" she asked. "However long it takes to fix it properly," Cameron replied without looking up. "Mike's thorough." She lingered there for a moment, her body framed in the door, then retreated without another word. Cameron shrugged it off. She had been acting strangely lately, distracted, secretive, and often distant. But he had chalked it up to the stress of planning their upcoming 5th anniversary party. Cameron's reply was calm, but his meaning was clear. "You'll know when the time comes." The stage was set. The conspirators believed they held the upper hand, confident that Cameron was too weak and drugged to resist. Yet beneath their noses, he had built a counter-strategy with the same meticulous planning he brought to skyscrapers and bridges. They thought they were guiding him toward his death, but Cameron Collier had already laid the foundation for their downfall. Friday would be the day of reckoning. Part 3. Friday morning dawned like any other in Phoenix, sunlight stretching across the desert landscape, heat already building in the air. But for Cameron Collier, the day carried a weight unlike any he had ever known. It was the day his wife and his partner believed would mark his final hours, the day they intended to end his life and claim everything he had built as their own. He rose before Jennifer stirred, moving with deliberate slowness, careful to maintain the fogginess that she expected to see. When she finally joined him in the kitchen, her smile was radiant, warm in the way only someone skilled in deception could manage, and she handed him his coffee with a flourish, as though it were a gesture of love rather than betrayal. "Extra cream this morning," she said lightly, her eyes glinting with anticipation. Cameron accepted the cup, thanked her, and drank it without hesitation, knowing the activated charcoal already coursing through his system would blunt most of the drug's effects. He even complimented the flavor, and the sparkle in Jennifer's eyes told him she believed her careful poison had taken hold. Within an hour, Cameron performed the role of a man slipping deeper into impairment. His speech slowed, his movements dragged, and when he left for the office, Jennifer kissed his cheek with a tenderness that would have fooled anyone but him. At Collier Construction, Stewart was waiting, his energy barely contained, the predatory smile at the corners of his mouth disguised by feigned concern. "Cameron, you look terrible," Stewart said, his tone layered with false sympathy. "Maybe you should take the weekend off. Let Jennifer and I handle the Morrison inspection. You need to rest." Cameron slumped in his chair, rubbing his temples as if the fog of exhaustion had claimed him entirely. "Maybe you're right," he mumbled. Stewart's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The trap they thought they had set was working, or so they believed. All day, Cameron maintained his performance, stumbling once, knocking over a cup of coffee, pausing mid-conversation as though his thoughts were unraveling. What Stewart could not see was the software on Cameron's systems recording every failed transfer attempt, redirecting millions that Stewart tried to steal into accounts under Cameron's control. Each click of Stewart's mouse, each keystroke, was captured and preserved. What Jennifer could not see was the network of surveillance teams positioned around the Morrison site. Operatives with cameras and microphones, officers stationed discreetly nearby under Detective Meadows' command. Every angle had been considered, every detail arranged. Cameron had constructed this plan with the precision of a skyscraper blueprint, and by mid-afternoon, the foundation of his counter-strategy was locked in place. By 4 o'clock, he left the office, walking to his truck with deliberate unsteadiness, the role of the poisoned victim almost too convincing even to himself. He felt the weight of months of betrayal pressing on his shoulders as he drove downtown, every mile bringing him closer to the stage where his enemies expected to destroy him. The Morrison project loomed against the skyline, a 30-story high-rise nearly complete, its steel frame and glass panels catching the sun. To Stewart and Jennifer, it was the perfect place for their charade. A half-finished floor high above the city, a location where a man could plausibly leap to his death under the crushing burden of guilt and despair. But to Cameron, It was something else entirely. It was the site where the hunters would become the hunted. The construction elevator groaned as it carried him to the 28th floor, every clank of its machinery echoing like a countdown. When the doors slid open, the floor spread out before him in raw, unfinished form, concrete pillars rising like sentinels, steel beams stretching across an open expanse, wires dangling from the ceilings, and the city sprawled below through wide, glassless window openings. The late afternoon sun slanted through the skeletal structure, painting long shadows across the dusty ground. It was the perfect stage for a tragedy, or for justice. Cameron's vision blurred. They weren't just planning to rob him, they were planning to murder him and make it look like suicide. Part 2. Cameron sat frozen in his workshop, the small waterproof box open before him like a Pandora's chest that could never be closed again. The photographs lay scattered across his workbench, each one a chilling reminder that the walls of his home had not been his sanctuary, but a stage set for predators who had been circling him like vultures. His wife, the woman he had loved and trusted, had not only betrayed him but had meticulously documented his routines, his weaknesses, and even the dosage of poison she slipped into his morning coffee. His business partner, the man who had smiled across boardroom tables and toasted with him after closing multi-million-dollar contracts, had been building a framework of lies and theft that reached deep into every corner of Collier Construction. Together, they had crafted a plan so cruel and calculated it made Cameron's stomach churn, drug him slowly, drain his accounts, destroy his reputation, and then eliminate him in such a way that the world would believe he had taken his own life in despair. The more he studied the evidence, the clearer the scope of their scheme became. Stewart's scribbled notes detailed the establishment of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and a network of false invoices designed to siphon company funds without triggering immediate audits. The photographs and security footage from hidden cameras revealed Jennifer sneaking through his files, rifling through documents in his office, and methodically adding pills to his coffee each morning with a smile that masked her true intentions. The recorder held hours of damning conversations, Stewart discussing the timing of financial transfers, Jennifer laughing about his increasing fatigue, and together the two of them fantasizing about a future spent luxuriating on foreign beaches, while Cameron's body lay cold in a morgue, his legacy destroyed, his name stained forever. Cameron leaned back in his chair, the enormity of the betrayal pressing down on him like a physical weight. He had built his company with his own hands, had trusted Stewart to handle the finances, had let Jennifer into the deepest parts of his heart, and in return, they had turned his trust into a weapon against him. Yet beneath the initial shock, a new feeling began to rise, slow but unstoppable, cold, calculating fury. He was not a man to crumble under pressure, not someone who gave in to despair. He had survived the brutal grind of the construction industry, had fought tooth and nail against competitors, corrupt contractors, and impossible deadlines. Now he faced the fight of his life, and though Jennifer and Stewart thought him weak, drugged, and oblivious, Cameron Collier was already shifting into the mode that had made him a builder of empires. He was planning. The first step had been to document everything. He spent the long hours of that night carefully photographing each page of notes, scanning documents into encrypted drives, and uploading copies to secure cloud storage accounts that only he controlled. He handled the evidence with the same precision he brought to blueprints and construction schedules. Every piece was cataloged, every file backed up, every secret locked away in multiple layers of security. By the time dawn painted the Arizona sky, Cameron had not only preserved the proof of their betrayal, but had also begun sketching the outline of a counter-strategy. At Collier Construction headquarters that morning, Cameron walked through the quiet corridors of the 50,000-square-foot facility, a fortress of steel and glass that represented 15 years of relentless effort. To outsiders, it was simply a workplace. To Cameron, it was a monument to his resilience. Inside the server room, he moved quickly and with purpose, installing monitoring software that would allow him to track every keystroke, every email, every financial move Stewart attempted. For years, Stewart had believed he controlled the financial side of the empire. Now every transaction would be under Cameron's watchful eye. The hunter had become the hunted. Next came the call to his longtime attorney, Philip Gross. A sharp legal mind who had grown up in the construction trade himself, Philip understood both contracts and character. Cameron kept his words careful, not revealing too much over the phone, but enough to set the gears in motion. "I need documents prepared," he said. "If my partner is engaging in financial irregularities, I want the ability to freeze his access and suspend his rights immediately." Philip hesitated, warning Cameron that such moves required undeniable proof and carried risks if his suspicions were unfounded. Cameron's reply was steel. "I'll have the proof," he said. "Just be ready." The only question was when and how the revelation was like a blade, cutting through the last remnants of Cameron's past life. The woman he had loved had never loved him at all. She had been studying him, planning his death from the very beginning. The partner he had trusted had been her accomplice. Together they had tried to reduce him to nothing, but they had failed. As officers cuffed Stewart and Jennifer, Detective Meadows signaled for his team to contact federal authorities. Edgar leaned close to Cameron and whispered, "This is bigger than them." The man they worked with, Francisco Lewis, he runs operations like this across the country. They're just part of a larger web. Cameron's eyes hardened as he watched Jennifer being led away, her head held high even in defeat. He knew this wasn't the end, only the beginning of something much larger. That night, as the lights of Phoenix glimmered below, Cameron stood at the edge of the Morrison site, looking out across the city he had helped build. He felt the weight of betrayal and survival, of justice narrowly won, and of a new responsibility pressing against his shoulders. He was no longer just a builder of buildings. He had become something else. A man who had stared into the abyss of betrayal and chosen to fight back, not just for himself, but for others who might fall prey to predators like Jennifer and Stewart. The war was far from over, but Cameron Collier had proven he was not a victim. He was a force, and he was only just beginning. Part 4. 2 weeks after the confrontation at the Morrison high-rise, Cameron Collier sat in the conference room of his attorney's office, a space that usually held blueprints and contract negotiations, but now brimmed with agents, prosecutors, and the weight of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond what he had imagined. The FBI had taken over, branding the investigation Operation Black Widow, a title both chilling and precise. Special Agent Maria McCormack spread maps across the polished table, each pin marking the site of a life destroyed or a fortune stolen. "Mr. Collier," she explained, her voice measured yet grave, "your decision to gather evidence rather than act rashly has given us an unprecedented look into this organization. Francisco Lewis has been orchestrating schemes like this for nearly a decade. We've confirmed 17 deaths tied directly to his network and over 40 major financial frauds across 12 states, totaling more than $300 million in stolen assets." Cameron studied the map in silence, his gaze drawn to the red pins that littered it like bloodstains. Each one represented someone like him, someone who had been targeted, drugged, manipulated, or killed. He thought of the box hidden in his crawl space, the photographs of himself taken in the most private corners of his life, the cold voice of his wife confessing to crimes in whispered tones. Now he realized he had not been the only one. He had simply been next in line, another mark on Lewis's priority list. Federal prosecutors laid out their strategy. Stuart Palmer had already agreed to cooperate fully. his desperation for survival driving him to bargain for life in prison rather than face the possibility of execution. His testimony, combined with the evidence Cameron had so carefully documented, gave the government the leverage to dismantle Lewis's empire. Jennifer, however, refused to bend. She had demanded a trial, her pride intact even as the walls of her deception crumbled. "She has shown no remorse," Agent McCormick told Cameron, her eyes sharp. "Given her involvement in multiple murders and conspiracies, the government will seek the death penalty." Cameron felt no joy in hearing it, only a grim sense of inevitability. Jennifer had built her life around destruction, weaving lies like silk until her victims were cocooned and helpless. She had never loved him, never even truly seen him as a person, only as another project, another target to be stripped of wealth and dignity before being erased. Now the system she had manipulated would be the one to judge her, and Cameron would stand in court as the key witness against her. In the weeks that followed, Cameron's life became a storm of legal meetings, debriefings, and endless retellings of his ordeal. He handed over files, recordings, photographs, and surveillance reports, each piece tightening the noose around Jennifer and Stuart's necks, and by extension, Francisco Lewis's wider network. Yet amid the chaos, he found clarity. He realized that his skills as a builder, as a planner, as a man who thrived in complexity, had been the very tools that saved him. Where others might have panicked or fled, he had treated the conspiracy as a project to be managed. Gather data, create redundancies, build defenses, anticipate failure points, and execute with precision. Now, those same methods were being studied by federal investigators. Still, something in her eyes had left an impression he couldn't quite shake. 2 hours later, Mike emerged from beneath the house. Dirt clung to his clothes, but it was not the grime that caught Cameron's attention. It was the pallor of his face. He carried something in his hands, a small black waterproof box about the size of a smartphone. "Cameron," Mike said, his voice unusually serious, "I found a problem with your water pressure. Someone deliberately pinched your main line with a clamp. But that's not the strange part." He lifted the box higher, his eyes wide with concern. This was tucked inside the main pipe access panel hidden behind the water meter. Judging by the dust, it's been there a while. Cameron took the box, feeling its weight, noticing the military-grade waterproofing and the small combination lock. His instincts told him this was no accident. Someone had placed it there with purpose. "Cameron," Mike continued, lowering his voice and glancing toward the house, "you need to call the cops. Don't tell your wife I found this. Something's not right here." The weight in Cameron's hands seemed heavier than its size. Mike was not a man given to panic. His instincts had carried him safely through 30 years of construction sites. If he was worried, Cameron had every reason to be. "What makes you say that?" Cameron asked, though his gut was already churning. The clamp wasn't random. It was set up to cause gradual pressure loss, not immediate failure. Someone wanted to create a problem that would require accessing that panel, and the box, it was mounted professionally. This was planned. Cameron's world shifted in that instant. He knew sabotage when he saw it, had seen it in broken beams or misplaced wires. This was deliberate. He dismissed Mike, thanked him, and sent him on his way. Alone in his truck, in the driveway, Cameron stared at the box. The lock was simple, a 3-digit model, but without the code, he would have to force it open. Who would hide something in his house, and why? What game was unfolding beneath the surface of his perfect life? Jennifer emerged from the front door, shading her eyes from the sun. "Is everything fixed?" she called out. "Getting there," Cameron replied quickly, slipping the box into his jacket pocket. "Mike needs to order a part. Water pressure should be back to normal tomorrow." Her relief seemed strangely intense, disproportionate to the problem. Cameron, a man who had built his empire on reading people, felt suspicion stirred deep inside. He knew when someone wasn't being honest. The instincts that had made him successful now screamed at him. Something was very wrong. That night, Jennifer claimed a headache and went to bed early. Cameron waited until the house was silent before retreating to his workshop in the garage. With steady hands honed by years of detailed construction work, he used a precision drill to bypass the lock. His breath slowed, his pulse quickened. The lid lifted. Inside, he found not tools or harmless trinkets, but evidence crafted with terrifying precision. A micro SD card in a protective case, printed photographs, handwritten notes, a small digital voice recorder. Cameron's blood ran cold as he examined the photographs. They showed him in states of unguarded vulnerability, sleeping in his own bed, working late in his office, even showering. Someone had been watching him for over 18 months. The notes were written in two distinct hands. One, elegant and fluid, belonged unmistakably to Jennifer. The other, bold and messy, carried the signature S.B. Stuart Plumber, his business partner, his supposed best friend. Cameron read Jennifer's notes, each word slicing through his chest. C's routine confirmed. Office late Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Usually asleep by 11 p.m. Sleeping pills and coffee working perfectly. He hasn't noticed the dosage increase. Then Stewart's scrawl. Security cameras installed in all target locations. Financial transfer protocols ready. Insurance policies confirmed. Timeline moves to phase 3 next month. Cameron felt as though the ground beneath him had collapsed. Stewart had been his partner for 3 years, the man who had helped expand Collier Construction into a powerhouse. Stewart managed the finances while Cameron handled the building. They were supposed to be a perfect team. Instead, his partner and his wife were conspiring to poison him, steal his empire, and ultimately kill him. He plugged in the recorder and listened. Jennifer's voice, tinged with excitement, filled his ears. He's completely clueless. The medication is working perfectly. He's been more tired, less sharp. Perfect timing for the financial transfers. Stewart's confident laugh followed. My contacts are ready. We'll liquidate the assets, funnel everything through the shells. By the time he realizes, we'll be in the Cayman Islands with 15 million Jennifer again. And the life insurance. That's the beautiful part. But Cameron knew legal tools alone wouldn't be enough. He needed eyes on his enemies, a net woven tightly enough that no lie or alibi could slip through. That was when he reached out to Edgar Pearson, a private investigator and former detective known for his discretion. Edgar had helped vet subcontractors for Collier Construction in the past, and Cameron trusted his professionalism. This time, the assignment was unlike anything before. I need surveillance, Cameron told him. 2 targets, my wife and my business partner. I need to know everyone they meet, every conversation, every place they go. This isn't just about business, it's about my life. Edgar's tone sharpened with understanding, and within hours, he had surveillance teams in place. Cameron's final move that day was to bring in an ally from within. He chose carefully, confiding only in Lance Hinton, his head of operations. Lance had started as a junior supervisor, working his way up with grit and loyalty, and Cameron trusted him with his life. In the privacy of his office, Cameron laid out the grim truth, showing Lance the evidence. The older man's weathered face darkened with outrage as he realized the extent of the betrayal. Those bastards, Lance growled. I always thought Stewart was too slick. And your wife? Jesus, boss. What do you need me to do? Cameron's answer was precise. Continue running the operation smoothly while quietly collecting evidence of Stewart's theft and watch his back. Lance agreed without hesitation. Together, they began to craft a plan not just to survive, but to turn the conspirators' own scheme against them. Cameron understood he couldn't act too soon. If he went to the police immediately, Jennifer and Stewart might flee, destroy evidence, or worse, accelerate their murderous timeline. No, the only way to defeat them was to let them believe they were succeeding, to play the role of the drugged, oblivious victim, while in truth recording every conversation, tracking every theft, and preparing a trap so complete that once it closed, There would be no escape. For the next several days, Cameron perfected his performance. Around Jennifer, he stumbled slightly, slurred his words, and rubbed his temples as though plagued by fatigue. Around Stuart, he appeared distracted, irritable, and foggy, reinforcing the illusion that their drugs were working. Behind the mask, however, Cameron's mind burned with clarity. He documented Stuart's financial manipulations as Lance uncovered them. Over $2 million siphoned through shell companies, small amounts spread across accounts to avoid audits. He listened to Edgar's surveillance reports detailing Jennifer's clandestine meetings with Stuart at downtown hotels, their voices captured through directional microphones as they plotted his demise with chilling casualness. "The increased dosage is working perfectly," Jennifer said in one recording. "He fell asleep during a meeting yesterday." Stuart's reply chilled Cameron to the core. "Good. My contact at the medical examiner's office says the drug cocktail will look like a suicide. All we need is the right time and place." The right time and place, Cameron soon learned, was already chosen. Lance discovered a scheduled set of massive financial transfers programmed to execute at precisely 5 p.m. on Friday. The same day, Edgar's team overheard Stuart and Jennifer discussing the staging of Cameron's suicide at the Morrison high-rise construction project. It was a bold, terrifyingly elegant plan. Drug Cameron heavily that afternoon, trigger the transfers, then take him to the 30-story site and make it appear that he had jumped in despair. By the time his body hit the pavement, Stuart and Jennifer would be boarding a flight with $15 million. But Cameron was not the oblivious pawn they believed him to be. He had Philip drafting emergency financial documents to counteract Stuart's transfer protocols, Edgar's teams positioning themselves to capture every move, and Lance preparing a full record of fraudulent transactions. Most importantly, Cameron had decided that he would let their plan unfold just enough for them to hang themselves with their own rope. The trap was nearly ready, and when it closed, there would be no mercy. As Thursday evening descended, Cameron reviewed the final details in his workshop, a battlefield disguised as a garage. He swallowed activated charcoal tablets, a safeguard to neutralize the effects of Jennifer's drugs. He rehearsed his performance of confusion and weakness, knowing he had to make it convincing until the final moment. He sent a message to Detective Roy Meadows of the Phoenix Police, requesting discreet patrols near the Morrison site, under the pretense of protecting against weekend vandalism. Meadows, a man who respected Cameron for his work on site security issues in the past, agreed to position units nearby. "If there's trouble, call me," the detective said. "The Collier method," Agent McCormick explained, "is already being incorporated into our training programs. Your systematic approach to evidence gathering has given us a model to pursue future cases Cameron had never imagined his blue-collar grit would shape federal investigations, yet here he was, the builder who had outplanned the predators." 6 months later, Cameron found himself in the hushed solemnity of a federal courtroom in Phoenix. Jennifer Harlow, stripped of her disguises and aliases, stood in shackles before the jury. Gone was the polished socialite who had once dazzled at charity galas. In her place stood a gaunt, hardened woman, her designer gowns replaced by an orange jumpsuit, her hair unkempt from months in custody. The trial had transfixed the nation. Media outlets painted her as a black widow of the modern era, a woman who weaponized love and trust to ensnare wealthy men before orchestrating their destruction. The prosecution's case was devastatingly thorough, built not only on Cameron's evidence, but also on testimony from other victims' families, financial records uncovered in Lewis's offices, and surveillance tying her to a string of deaths long believed to be accidents or suicides. Cameron sat through every day of testimony, his pulse steady but his heart heavy. He listened as recordings of Jennifer's voice were played for the jury, her laughter cold as she discussed his failing strength, her words clinical as she plotted his death. He watched as photographs of his drugged, vulnerable self were shown. Images once hidden in secret, now broadcast under fluorescent courtroom lights. He listened as prosecutors described the life insurance policies she had taken out on him, $4 million in benefits waiting to be claimed upon his suicide. Each detail reinforced the chilling truth. She had never been his partner in life, only his executioner in waiting. When the jury returned, the room held its breath. Guilty, the foreman declared again and again, on conspiracy to commit murder, on attempted murder, on racketeering, on financial fraud. Jennifer's expression never changed, her face a mask of cold defiance even as her fate was sealed. Judge Victoria Kirby pronounced the sentence with solemn authority: death by lethal injection, followed by 6 consecutive life sentences without parole. The gavel struck, and with it, a chapter of Cameron's life closed forever. Justice had been served, though the satisfaction he expected did not come. Instead, he felt only a quiet, profound sense of closure. Outside the courthouse, Agent McCormick updated him on the wider picture. Francisco Lewis's network had been dismantled, 43 arrests across 12 states, hundreds of millions in stolen assets recovered. It was the largest prosecution of financial murder conspiracies in federal history, and Cameron's name was etched into its foundation. Stuart Plumber, now a broken man, lived out his days in a maximum security facility, his cooperation buying him survival, but no freedom. Jennifer awaited her final judgment on death row, the predator caged at last. The world would move on, but Cameron would never forget. In the months that followed, Cameron turned his focus towards something new. He realized that surviving was not enough. If this organization had found him, others were surely being hunted even now. The thought of someone else sitting in their garage, staring at photographs of their private life, feeling the same cold betrayal, was unbearable. So he decided to build again, not skyscrapers this time, but a foundation. The Cameron Foundation for Financial Predator Prevention was born, dedicated to educating potential victims, funding law enforcement training, and offering resources to those who found themselves caught in webs of deceit. With Lance Hinton as his operational director and Edgar Pearson as a key investigator, the foundation quickly became a beacon of hope. In its first year alone, it intervened in 37 cases, protecting 44 potential victims from conspiracies eerily similar to the one Cameron had endured. Collier Construction thrived, its projects continuing to reshape Phoenix. But for Cameron, the foundation became his true passion. He stood in the headquarters 1 year after Jennifer's trial, studying a map covered in red pins, each marking a case where the foundation had made a difference. To him, those pins were monuments of victory, each one a life saved, each one a predator stopped. "Not bad for the first year," Lance said at his side, pride in his voice. Cameron smiled faintly. "Not bad," he agreed, though his eyes remained hard, aware that the work was never truly finished. Jennifer emerged first, stepping from behind a pillar, her beauty striking even in the harsh light. She smiled with false warmth, the mask of a devoted wife etched flawlessly on her face. "We've been waiting for you," she said, her tone rich with rehearsed affection. Stuart appeared from the opposite side, clipboard in hand, his expression one of professional concern. "Cameron, you really don't look well," he said, guiding him toward the far side of the floor where the safety barriers framed the gaping drop. Cameron stumbled slightly, slurring his words, playing the part. "Need to check the progress," he muttered, his voice dragging, his eyes half-lidded. Stuart and Jennifer exchanged a look, their masks slipping just enough for Cameron to glimpse the cold satisfaction beneath. Stuart began his performance, his words dripping with rehearsed sadness. "Cameron, there's been a problem with the finances. 15 million missing. The evidence points to you." He held up a tablet displaying forged bank statements, fabricated signatures, and documents that painted Cameron as a thief. Jennifer's grip tightened on his arm, her nails digging into his skin as she added softly, "We want to help you, but you need to admit what you've done. You've been under so much stress. The drugs in your system explain everything." They were weaving their narrative, layering lies upon lies, preparing to record a coerced confession that would cement the story of his guilt before staging his death. Cameron swayed, blinking slowly, drawing them further into their illusion. Then, with deliberate clarity, his voice sharpened, the fog vanishing like smoke in the wind. "You're right," he said, his tone steady now, eyes locked on theirs. "Someone has been stealing. Someone has been planning to destroy everything I built, but it wasn't me." The change was immediate. Jennifer's face paled. Stuart's eyes narrowed. Panic flickered, then hardened into hostility. Stuart's hand moved toward his jacket, metal glinting as he pulled a compact pistol free. Cameron's heart pounded, but he did not falter. "I know about the sleeping pills in my coffee," he said, his voice rising with each word. "I know about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, and your plan to kill me today. Did you really think I'd build a $50 million company by being blind to betrayal?" Jennifer took a step back, her mask shattered, her voice breaking with panic. "Cameron, you're confused." "The drugs." "Neutralized," Cameron interrupted coldly. "Charcoal took care of that. And every word you've said, every plan you've made has been recorded." The sound of footsteps thundered from the stairwell. Edgar Pearson's operatives burst into the room, followed by Detective Meadows and his officers, weapons drawn, voices commanding Stuart to drop his gun. Chaos erupted in the unfinished space, the echo of shouted orders bouncing off concrete. Stuart spun toward them, weapon in hand, his face twisted with rage, but Meadows' voice cut through the air. "Police! Drop it now!" Realization dawned on Stuart's face, followed quickly by desperation. He tried to pivot, his eyes darting between the armed officers and Cameron standing resolute before him. "You don't understand," Stuart shouted. "Cameron's been embezzling. We have evidence." Cameron raised his phone high, his calm voice slicing through the chaos. "Actually, I have evidence. Months of it. Every word you just said is recorded and already secured with my legal team." Jennifer bolted toward the elevator, but Edgar's men intercepted her, blocking her escape. Her scream rang hollow, shrill with panic. "He's insane! Cameron's having a psychotic break," she cried, but no one listened. The net had closed, the trap had sprung. Meadows demanded an explanation, his eyes on Cameron, and in that moment Cameron laid it all bare. He described the sleeping pills, the theft, the staged suicide, the insurance policies, and the offshore accounts, while Edgar produced files, recordings, and photographs. The weight of proof was overwhelming. Stuart's gun wavered as the truth pressed in from all sides, until finally he set it on the ground and kicked it away, his face contorted with fury and fear. But then, in a last-ditch attempt at survival, Stuart spoke words that shifted the ground again. "You don't understand. Jennifer's been doing this for years. She's not who you think she is." He revealed that her real name was Jennifer Harlow, that she was a professional black widow who had targeted wealthy men before, each one ending in financial ruin or death, disguised as accident or suicide. She had not stumbled into Cameron's life at a charity gala by chance. She had studied him, researched him, chosen him as her next victim. Cameron turned to Jennifer, his heart hollow, his stomach twisting as her silence confirmed the truth. "From the day I met you," she said finally, her voice cold, stripped of pretense, "you were always going to die." One evening, his phone buzzed with a call from Agent McCormick. The FBI had uncovered another conspiracy in the early stages, another wealthy family targeted, another predator weaving lies. "We'd like the Foundation's help," she said. Cameron looked out across the skyline of Phoenix, the city he had helped build, and felt the weight of his calling. "We'll be ready," he replied. In the end, Stuart Palmer and Jennifer Harlow had tried to make him a victim, to erase him and everything he had built. Instead, they had forged in him something stronger than they could ever have imagined. He was no longer simply a builder of structures. He had become a builder of justice, a protector of those who did not yet know they were being hunted. And in his heart, Cameron Collier knew the truth. Sometimes the greatest construction projects were not made of steel and stone, but of resilience, vigilance, and the determination to ensure that predators never again found easy prey.